So for the record,
what?
For the record, this is a Twilight Zone t-shirt, not a Twilight t-shirt. I just wanted to make that clear before we.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
all right. So
very important to know.
Cool
Actually,
points.
Okay, are you on Team Jacob or what?
Yeah, I was gonna.
I'm ashamed that you even know what that means.
I'm glad you pointed that out there, lady.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome to the Lovecraft Easing podcast. DeBronzo's just showing up.
There he is.
Better late than never, but whatever. So yeah, that's right. I'm talking about you, DeBronzo.
That's right.
He's not even on yet, to talk to defend himself.
That's when you hit him hard.
I was going to say it's the best time to swing when they're not expecting it.
That's right.
There he is.
DeBronzo's like,
there he is. There's DeBronzo.
I don't think he heard anything we said.
It was all super nice stuff.
I still don't think he hears anything we said. So anyway, we got to do this show and everything, so he can work out his own problems. I'm Mike Davis, which you may know if you've ever seen the show before or listened to it. And let's do introductions, and we're going to talk. I guess today is Nick Bodick. Am I saying your last name right? Bodick. I'm sorry. Nick Bodick. That's what happens when you have a conversation with somebody, and it's always only text,
It's cool. Literally everyone gets it wrong, so don't feel too bad.
Well, Nick Bodick, and Nick is a writer, but also he is very, very knowledgeable in the history of internet horror, like CreepyPasta, CreepyPasta. Sorry, God, sound like an old man. CreepyPasta, CreepyPasta, and NoSleep. My listeners are going, Christ, the Gen Xer is doing this.
You just combine NoSleep and CreepyPasta into one thing, Sleepy Pasta. I think you can make it a thing.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to be efficient. God. Yeah. So anyway, let's do introductions and then we'll talk to Nick. So Bridget, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hello. I'm Bridget. Oh, sorry. I should say good evening. But I write music, draw some things, and watch horror, and yeah.
I do not drink wine. Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt. Unlike Bridget, I don't wear Twilight t-shirts. Anyway, our prize this week is a novel, Crooked, which postulates that the reason Nixon had so many problems, he was secretly fighting Lovecraftian horrors.
I think that's legit.
If you want to win this, send an email to easingprizes@gmail.com and put Crooked in the subject heading. We usually draw a winner in 6-7 weeks.
Well, I should point out.
Better win that, Matt.
Am I eligible?
The author name, if you send it an email, plus $50 to me. It's by Austin Grossman, who I got the Kindle version of this. I just haven't read it yet, but I know I'm going to like it because he wrote another book I really liked called Soon I Will Be Invincible. It's a superhero novel. It's really, really good. So,
Matt, can you hold that book up again for me, please, so I can see the author?
Austin Grossman,
Crooked. Okay.
Yeah.
So helpful, Matt.
Jesus. You want to introduce yourself, Rich?
Yeah. Hey, Rich. I'm a member of the Lovecraft zine and just a fanboy. And no, I don't have any of the skills that Bridget does, or any of the reading capability that Matt does. So all I do.
But you have the coolest library.
I have the cool library, and I've got huge Predator statues because I'm a big Predator fan. So I've got a bunch of Predator statues here. So that's all. That's my claim to fame. That's all I've got.
Notice how you didn't mention me at all.
To quote Sheen, they are not dolls. They are action figures.
That's right. Exactly.
DeBronzo, are you with us?
Yeah, sorry, I was having some technical difficulties.
We were having a stance for a second. DeBronzo, are you with us?
Knock on the table, DeBronzo. Knock on the table. Yeah, we said really nice things about you when you couldn't hear us, just so you know, if you play this back later.
That's a shame. Sorry to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah. And by nice things, I mean we didn't say nice things. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I would expect nothing less.
All right. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Mike DeBronzo. I'm late. How are you?
Succinct. Is
Wait,
is
you're
that right?
from New
Succinct?
Jersey. That should say
Yeah.
everything, Bronzo.
Yeah, that's
I try not to spread that around.
great. You just lost me 1/50th of my US listener base.
Nah. I've been here for 49 years, so what's that
So,
tell you?
all right. Nick Boddick is our guest. Nick sent me an email several months ago, with a suggestion for coming on the show and talking about something that he is apparently well versed in, internet, the history of internet horror, would you say? CreepyPasta, NoSleep, other places, I suppose. Something I'm decidedly not an expert in, but I'm fascinated by it. So yeah. You also, I've got in the show notes, I'll have links to your YouTube channel, Nick, and to your website. But why don't you just take a minute, introduce yourself? You write books too, and I think you got links to those on your website as well.
Yeah, I try to. Yeah, I'm Nick Boddick. I'd say primarily I'm a writer, but recently, like, I write horror fiction. And I've been into horror my whole life, and I got started writing in NoSleep. That's kind of where I kind of climbed the ladder and honed everything and learned a lot of bad habits of writing, actually. Because it's very different writing for NoSleep, especially now, than it is just writing. So I haven't been writing there for about a year and a half or so. I haven't posted anything there, but I don't know. I've just always been fascinated in, like, I like the histories of things. And since this is kind of where I've built my life and career, I just kind of got into the history of it all and got into where it all started. And yeah, it's been really cool. Gotten to talk to a lot of really cool people.
It's interesting because my son's 20 years old and he doesn't really read horror books, but he's been into horror his whole life. He's read a lot of horror. CreepyPasta, NoSleep, listened to a lot of horror on YouTube channels. So it's just it's a different way of consuming horror, and in some ways it's a different kind of horror. There's a hell of a lot of originality there.
Oh yeah, there's the breadth of things that people are able to. I feel like if you're reading like a Stephen King book, like, there are a lot of parts of it that are relatable. I mean, specifically with Stephen King, I guess, but like when you're reading a horror book, there's a lot of like fantastical elements. But when you get down to like what creepypastas started as, they were made to make people think they were actually true.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, they kind of got rid of, like, or not got rid of, but didn't incorporate those more fantastical elements. And yeah, it was the digital version of campfire stories, basically. And yeah,
And
like,
make you wonder, this could really happen, or maybe this did happen.
yeah, for sure.
It sort of reminds me, old person comment coming up, but Vincent Price did a radio show in the 70s called The Price of Fear. And when he introduced the show, the very first episode, he said, I'm in a lot of horror movies and everything. And he goes, but those things really couldn't happen, in those movies. They're fun to watch, for a lot of people, but they couldn't really happen. And then in the show, he plays in many of the episodes, he plays a fictionalized version of himself and saying, this happened to me. And it's all very, very creepy, but most of them you think, yeah, that could definitely happen.
Yeah.
So it reminded me of that.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of the original stories don't have, like, they're not credited to anybody. They were posted on places like 4chan, Reddit, on like throwaway accounts, and we're all just completely anonymous. And so that like lended itself to the debates that inevitably follow all those stories. I'm like, oh yeah, no, this for sure happened. I know a person who knows the guy this happened to. Like, and so yeah, it's just having
New
it.
urban legends were born.
Exactly. Like a good example is like the Russian sleep experiment. Are you familiar with that one?
I don't think I am.
It's one of the earlier ones that was written probably 2007-ish, 2009, somewhere in there. And yeah, it's written as like a factual account of this sleep experiment that the Russians did that ended with, carnage and stuff. I don't want to ruin the story, but I mean, studios have been trying to like option it for years, and no one's ever been able to find the person who wrote it. No one's ever stepped up. I mean, I'm sure people have stepped up, and no one's been able to prove that they wrote it. But because there was no one to credit it to, and no one was like, okay, yeah, I wrote this story. Here's my next one. Even now, that story is believed to be real by a ton of people.
The book Pen Pal started, I don't know where, but like NoSleep or CreepyPasta or someplace like that.
Yeah, I just talked to Dathan Auerbach last weekend for my new podcast, actually.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and I swore that story was true until last weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you think you could hook me up? I'd love to get him on there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. He's a really cool guy.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I read his second book too,
Bad
Man. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
that was
great.
great.
Yeah.
I don't, and the less said about Pen Pal, the better.
Mhm.
I don't even think people should read the synopsis of Pen
Oh,
Pal.
I
think
agree.
they should just go. But it's one of the scariest books I've ever read, and
Same.
that's kind of typical of every time I stop in and I read like a creepypasta. Like just today, I knew I was going to be talking to you. I'm like, okay, let's read another one, and I'm not going to tell what the story was, but it was it involved basically the fact that this guy knew that someone had been living in his house for weeks, if not months, watching him and his wife,
Ugh. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's such a simple premise.
right.
Like there doesn't need to be like demons, ghosts, rituals, cults. Like it's just a creepy dude.
Right. On my Patreon a year or so back, my friend Laird Barron, we did a episode where he talked about true but creepy but true things that have happened to him in his life. And the thing is, and you can listen to that for $5 a month. That's my sales pitch for my Patreon, Lovecraft Easing Patreon. But the point is, he said to me something that I always remembered: whether there's a supernatural explanation for this story, if there's a supernatural explanation for this story, it's creepy. And if there's not a supernatural explanation for this story, it's creepy. It's scary either way. Because one of the particular stories he told, it's like, who the fuck would do that? Who would do? I mean, So anyway, talk to us about let's start off with kind of how all this started and work our way from there, if you think that's the best way to do this.
Yeah. So basically so in the 90s, when the internet was first starting to take off, chain emails were pretty much I would say the genesis of internet horror, the first instance of horror kind of being used, or the internet being used for the purposes of creating and disseminating horror. And so you would get those emails. If you don't send this to 10 people, the Clarissa will come and kill you in your sleep. And
Right.
then, so that was, I mean, I was 9 years old when I was first doing that, like first using the
Jeez.
internet, and so it scared the shit out of me. Like,
Right.
and yeah, so that, and then those started to, those chain emails, which were originally, you know, maybe a sentence or two, turned into, it would be more, it'd be like a paragraph or a page, and then there would be a picture there too. The earliest one I could find was the it was a story about a patient in a hospital who the doctors tried to save her and didn't, and she was vengeful because of that. And it was a picture of like a hospital bed in a room, and then there's this like ghostly woman underneath the bed looking up. And that email was sent out, I mean, tens, hundreds of thousands of times, and it was the same thing. Like, if you don't send this, she's going to show up. Don't know how that works if you're not in a hospital, since that's like the basis of the story, but I don't think that mattered. And
Well,
then,
we can smile at it, but you mentioned being a kid when all this started, and then there's also, you know, a lot of people are superstitious too, and it's easy to make fun of it. I'm not, but I'm not going to make fun of it. And
right.
a lot of people, maybe their mindset was and is, you know what, I don't really think this, but just to be safe, I'm gonna send it on.
And that's, I talked to a lot of people, because I made a lot of posts trying to find people who had, you know, seen these in the past, had like you know, just reached out, put out general, hey, if you remember these, shoot me a message, posts on like Reddit and elsewhere. And yeah, most of them were, I don't think this is true, but I mean, just on the off chance that it is, I might as well, you know, send it out. So I definitely think that's primarily what it is. Like, I don't think a lot of people were really thinking, but were really thinking that if I don't do this, I'm gonna die at midnight.
Right.
But like in the way horror stories do, it kind of like worked its way in and gave you just that 1% of doubt, and that made you resend it out.
Reminds
And
me of the horror version of Dear Pit House. I don't usually write letters like this, but
yeah, right. Yeah, and yeah, no, from there it those persisted. I mean, they still send those out. They're few and far between now, but I mean, and they just kind of evolved into spam email.
what was the next evolution? Was it Usenet?
It was Ted the Caver, actually.
Okay.
Ted the Caver, for anyone who doesn't know, is widely considered the first creepypasta ever written. And it started as this guy, Ted. He was an actual caver, or is an actual caver. Made it sound like he's dead. He's not. He's a cool guy. He started a blog on angelfire.com. And
I don't remember that. Yeah.
right, like way back in the day, I think it was 2005, I want to say. And he was just posting periodic updates for his family and friends. And then one day he just kind of, while he was writing one, he just kind of thought, it'd be kind of fun if I put in something creepy happening here. And that kind of gave birth to the whole, like, this is all real, and I'm just a regular guy writing about this weird thing that's happening to me. Read it if you want, believe it if you want, doesn't matter, but it happened. And that's kind of how that was the attitude through the whole thing. And yeah, then from there, I mean, that's still debated today, 100%. You can look on Reddit. If you search on Reddit, is Ted the Caver real? You'll find posts from this month of people asking if it's real.
It reminds me of Stephen King's, the first sentence in his story, The Mist. A lot of these creepypastas, even weird fiction and so forth, you know, where they're like, I can't explain it, but this is what happened. And the first 4 words were exactly that. This is what happened, you know, in that story.
Yeah.
So I haven't read Ted the Caver. What did he say? What was the weird thing he said happened?
So it all starts out, it's a very, very detailed documenting of him and his buddy finding a passage. It's like a hole in this cave that they're going through. They find that it opens to a new passage, and that's real. Like when they started documenting their work on widening this hole so they can go in and explore a previously unexplored part of this cave, like that was all 100% true.
Okay.
But so once they get into it, so while they're doing that, that's where he started putting in the creepy aspects of it. He some of it were like they would hear just real like loud gusts of wind that would come through and sound like they're coming from all around him. And then his dog would be with them, and the dog wanted nothing to do with this hole that they were, carving through, wanted nothing to do with this new passage in the cave. And it was just stuff like that. And then once they finally make it through, they start finding like carvings on the walls, and it's all very vague. And there's no monsters like from the Descent. There's no monsters down there. Like they're not here. Like they might be hearing creepy voices, but they can't tell if it's just the wind or not. They're not like hearing like get out or anything like that. Like, so it's all very low key, kind of just like, it might be weird if it's not just the wind.
But he
sort of
also
things.
included photos, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which was something kind of new, right?
Yeah.
Just these kind
I'm
of
sorry.
photos.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I completely forgot to mention that. Yeah. And so this story was bolstered by the photos. He documented every point of this, this caving expedition. And so that was just another thing that just supported the authenticity of it all. Like you could see them crawling through like this new hole that they made in the cave, and you could see pictures of the hole when it was this big, and then the progress of their work until they carved it open and it was big enough to fit a person through. And so yeah, the photos were huge for it, and those are primarily the evidence of what's being used today, because what they did once they did make it through that part, and this is the story Ted the Caver was told through multiple blog posts over the course of I think 9 months or something, maybe even longer. I think it was about a year and a half, because I know he wrote a bunch of it and then stopped and then came back for 1 or 2 updates. So I think the bulk of it was about 9 months, and then finally after a year and a half or so, it ended.
And the big thing
ended.
was that he ended on a cliffhanger.
Yes.
Right. He did,
Yes.
and he never ever went back.
Nope.
So there was 15 years later, he never went back. There's no further post from this guy, so people were fascinated with this guy, right?
Yeah,
because this wasn't a guy who tried to make money, obviously. So it fed into this. What's going on?
Yeah.
Right?
Do we know what happened to him?
Well, in the story, he's at his house writing up, typing up this blog post, and then he's like, all right, me and B, his friend in the story, are heading back. I will update as soon as I can.
And you never hear anything else.
And he didn't
Never-
update.
Never hear another
And
word.
that's when
brilliant.
they made the movie.
That
in
is brilliant.
2013, right?
Mhm.
What was it again, Nick? The
Living Dark.
Living Darkness, the
Mm.
Living Dark. And I think some of us on the podcast here, we've watched that, because I think I brought it up a couple of years ago, and it's creepy. It is creepy as hell. The
I'll
movie's
have to
great.
watch it.
I love the movie's great, actually.
I'll
but-
make 2 I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I will just say that the movie's great, but here's the thing is that's really interesting about using the internet is one, people are able to tell stories without going through that kind of without having to go through publishers, right?
Right.
You don't have to rely on an editor or somebody to tell you how to tell your story. You can get it out there. And I will tell you now that right now, last night I went over to spend the evening with my sons and, you know, my ex-wife at their house. And they had never watched Hell House LLC, any of those.
Oh,
We
I
watched
love
all
those.
three.
I love those
We
too.
watched all three. But my sons both, though they had never seen those movies and they didn't know what I was talking about when I would talk about horror. However, they knew all about YouTube horror, like Jeff the Killer, or if you're watching Mr. Ballin, who is a
I love
former
Mr.
Navy
Ballin.
SEAL, right? He's a Navy SEAL who now tells these stories, right? So they're much more familiar with the YouTube and the internet storytelling than they are with the mainstream movie and horror novels and short stories, which is what we are all more familiar with. So it's really interesting that you have these two different venues for telling stories.
Yeah, like I was saying, my son doesn't read horror books, Rich, but he reads horror all the time and listens to horror stories all the time.
Right.
Same. My son's about the same age, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this and that." Like how I learned about the back rooms is from my son, and I was like,
Right.
"What is this a thing like that?" The back rooms of all of them freaked me out.
So I want to make
Yes.
two quick
Mhm.
comments. First is, you know, as Lovecraft said, the fear of the unknown is, I'm paraphrasing, the scariest type of horror. I forget exactly what he said. But and CreepyPasta, Ted, what you told me about Ted the Caver, does that brilliantly because it doesn't show the monster if there is one. It doesn't, you don't know really what's going on, but it could be this, could be that. So you've got that fear of the unknown. Once it's known, no matter how horrible it is, some of the fear always goes away because you know what you're dealing with. When you don't know what you're dealing with, then it's scarier.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, nothing is scarier than the thing you're picturing in your head.
Right.
Like no matter what it ends up being, the quote is, the oldest and strongest emotion of
Right.
mankind is fear, and the strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, and a lot of creepypastas actually do that actually. And I don't think it was a conscious thing. I think it was like, I don't think it was a conscious thing not to describe the monsters or anything, but I don't think it was like, I'm going to do this because fear of the unknown is creepy. I think that was just done more as more in that.
I think it naturally
tripping
fits
up over
into
my
the
thought.
venue.
Yeah.
You know, the other comment I wanted to make was, and you said this earlier too, Nick, you know, people have said, well, why are these people writing all these stories when they're not getting paid for them? What you have to remember is that we're humans. And you said that this is the modern version of sitting around the campfire telling stories. We are storytelling and story listening creatures. 100,000 years ago, that's how we passed the time at night, when we weren't sleeping. And so it's a natural human thing. That's why there's so many TV shows and movies and books, and because we hunger for this, and we like telling stories, even if we're not getting paid for it. Most of us have told. I mean, we've all told stories of one kind or another, even if we're just telling, hey, this is what happened to me on the freeway this morning, that type of thing. It's just a natural human thing.
Yeah,
So.
For sure. And yeah, like I think those early stories, like with Ted the Caver, it absolutely was just for fun. He didn't want anything from it, didn't expect anything from it. He just thought it'd be fun to tell a creepy story that maybe one or two people would read and get a little bit of a chill from it. And
except thousands and thousands of people loved it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We had Jack, the guy that created the turn left,
right left game.
the right left game. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, Jack is
Oh
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, he is. And he's got quite a, actually the episode, if you go back and listen to it, that when we interviewed him, you know, here's a guy that wasn't writing for a living, but he's got a lot of insight into the craft,
Oh yeah.
you know? So, and now he did it for fun, and now it got turned into a podcast. I think it's going to get turned into a series.
Amazon picked it up. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
He deserves it. It's a great story.
The big time. Oh, it's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
don't listen to it in your car.
Yeah, right.
But
yeah, no,
you know, one of the things that I really enjoy is that internet horror, you're not confined by the literary constraints of having to write a short story or a novel, right? There are certain constraints. If you're a writer, you know, your diction has to be right, the way you construct your sentences and your that's why you have editors that help you get through, right? This whole process. Internet guys don't need to do that. They just tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what the structure of their paragraphs are like, right?
Well, and then the audience decides.
The audience,
yeah,
yes, right.
Exactly.
And that's a really interesting thing, because where this is a new thing because of technology and history. Where else other than old school fireside chats can folks like this tell these types of stories, and it doesn't get intervened by, say, editors and publishers, right? There are some wonderful writers, and they're great writers because they understand the writing, how to write, and how a sentence ought to be structured. But then there are other, you know, the internet seems to be one of these last bastions to where it's not about how you construct a sentence, but how you tell the story, almost as if it's an audio story, but the internet gives you an ability to, you know, to put it down in print, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's
and the lack of
just
perfection, Rich, can add to the authenticity.
Yeah, to where people
absolutely.
believe that it actually happened and it's not just a story.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, like this guy
Yeah.
can't spell, but damn, this probably happened, you know, because and it's a
Exactly.
great story, you know.
There is like two things to that point. Actually, there's one story it's just called Anansi's Goatman story, and it's one of the all-time greats, and it's written in a 4chan post, and it's purportedly by this like 14-year-old kid, and he's telling this thing that happened while he was camping with like 10 other people or something. And the way he tells the story, he's like, holy fucking shit, you guys, this crazy bullshit just happened. You'll never fucking believe, like, and there's all these sorts of like spelling errors,
Right.
and like, and he's like,
Yeah.
my dumbass cousin Brian was over there, and I'm like, hey Brian, you fucking idiot, get over it. Like, he's just telling it like a scared kid would tell the story.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's so good. It's such an entertaining story, and it's creepy. Like,
It's brilliant.
yeah, and it's fantastic. But then Jeff the Killer,
Yeah, Jeff the Killer is. Yeah.
that is where that kind of the tide turned on the whole misspellings lending to authenticity, because the guy who created Jeff the Killer, his name is Jeff Case. He's an artist on DeviantArt under the name Cessur. He does great stuff. And he made the Jeff the Killer.
How do you spell that? Just for people who are...
Sesseur.
Okay.
On DeviantArt, yeah.
Right.
And he created the original Jeff the Killer photo, and then wrote a very, very short story, ended up deleting that story, but someone else created a story, which is the one that is considered the original Jeff the Killer story. And it is just abysmally written, and there are less words spelled correctly than there are incorrect. Like, it's terribly, terribly written, terribly formatted, terribly spelled, terrible grammatically. And so that worked against it because it was so bad. Like, it was written because they were trying to make it seem like they were rushing through this story to, you know, because Jeff was coming to get them or whatever. And
Which, by the
Yeah.
way, no editor for like Penguin would allow that to get through if you were to write a novel, right?
oh,
Right?
never,
I mean, that wouldn't
never.
fly, but yeah, on the internet, it lends to the credibility, right?
Yeah,
I haven't
but
read this, but it sounds like so what you're describing so far, like Dagon. Oh, the window, he's coming through the window now, you know, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
kind of, yeah. It's
My God, the window.
Well, let me ask you, Nick, if you know, one of the things, you know, I've been thinking of then, is so you have all these opportunities for wonderful storytellers on the internet side, as opposed to the written publishing side, right? They don't have any of the restraints that perhaps the written publishing side has. So they're much more open-ended in terms of the stories they can tell, but how do you get remuneration, right, for your storytelling in a way that the publishing side, for all its restraints, if you're a storyteller, you're going to get paid, right?
yeah.
It's much more difficult on the other, at least it seems to me, or am I wrong? Have you
Oh,
looked
no.
into that? And
Yeah, so I've been writing semi-professionally for about 7 years now,
Okay.
and I have only just recently, in the last year or so, I've started selling stories to like anthologies and collection magazines and stuff.
and there are CreepyPasta now anthologies.
Yes, yes, there are.
So yes.
Yeah, but so most people who write, say for NoSleep is the biggest market for internet horror stories.
And
It's-
that's a podcast. There's a NoSleep podcast too,
yes,
right?
but the two are not connected.
Oh, they're not connected. Okay.
No,
Thank you.
two
Thank you for
completely
that.
different
Okay.
things. Yeah. So I mean, they're second place as far as internet horror literature outlets, not even close. NoSleep has, I think, going on 17 million members. The next is not even anywhere near it.
Okay.
What people who write for NoSleep, who are trying to, you know, break into writing professionally, they'll do pretty much what I did. I got nickbodic.com, shout out nickbodic.com, and
I'll have it in the show notes. No problem.
yeah, so then I would post some stories there, and then I'd get money through ads. And then there are a lot of people who will sell stories to, it doesn't even count as small presses. It's just, this author on NoSleep is putting together a book and we're going to self-publish it through Amazon. And usually the payment structure there, I can actually speak to this with some knowledge because I did, I think, 4 books that very way, not worth it at all. It's basically, okay, if we sell 10 books, that month's money gets divided up between the 15 authors there. And so that's one way. There are other people who have that upfront capital and are able to be like, okay, I'll pay you $30 for a story for this collection, and then just a one and done. But a lot of, like, primarily I'd say for a long time, my money came through ads on my website, and just, you know, at Google AdSense or whatever I used, AdWords, whatever it was.
Yeah, and all of this is true, and this is sort of the format I did when I started Lovecraft Easing years ago. You know, it was something I wanted to do, and then maybe I could make money at it if it got popular. Like a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, enough to keep me going. But I think when we talk about money for the purposes of this conversation, that's not really the point of the conversation, because Rich, I mean, it's a good question, but most of these folks are writing because, like I said, we are storytelling creatures, and they're writing because, you know, Soren Narnia, Knife Point Horror, he doesn't get paid. He's a hell of a writer, and he's like, you know, my payment is when people listen to it and they love it. You know, so, and here's a very popular podcast. Soren you know, I know his real name. He's got a regular job, which he doesn't want out there. But he's got a regular job. He doesn't need to do this for the money. He just loves doing it. So,
Well, and it
Yeah.
kind of seems like some of the point of it is not to have the intellectual property, because it gets new life when more and more people are repeating it and telling their own stories about it. And then it makes it seem even more real that it
Yeah,
happened
I
to
agree. That's a
somebody.
great point, Bridget.
And then
Yeah.
that's not even the point. It's just
Right.
become this whole like groupthink thing, you know, that
Right. It's a true campfire story, right? It's the
that's
kind
exactly
of
the
thing
point. Yeah.
that kids will tell generations over and over and over. Hey, my grandfather told this same story. Yeah, you know what? It's probably real, right?
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? And you don't get that with the publishing side of the
Yeah.
house.
Well, no, because that's a craft and that's an
Right.
intellectual property thing. So it's
Yes.
two different things. That's like, you know,
Plus,
not
Bridget,
even
to
really
your point,
comparable.
I think that if, to your point, if if the original author is anonymous, it lends even more to the, hey, this might have happened,
Right.
because we can't track this guy or gal down and now ask them, because there's nobody to
No.
track down.
And I'm not saying there aren't great authors that do that. I'm just saying that it's not, the intellectual property is not what it's about really at that
Right.
point.
It's about the
I
story.
will say, so I think that was true for a long time. I think that was true when creepypastas were still doing that. So basically before NoSleep became what it is, I think that was the case. Because NoSleep was started on a Ask Reddit post. The question was, what's the scariest thing that ever happened to you, or what's the most scariest, most unexplainable thing, something like that. People were telling all these stories, and then someone created the subreddit NoSleep and was like, hey, if you guys want to post these stories here, this can just be the place we post these kinds of things. And so that turned into kind of the hub for creepypasta stories, because before they were being posted on 4chan, Angel Fire, just all these different places. This kind of gave it one central
Simple, but brilliant.
location. Exactly.
Brilliant, because it is simple. It's all in one place.
Yeah. And so in the early days of NoSleep back in 2010, it was pretty much the Wild West. They allowed pictures, they allowed third person stories, and it was pretty much so creepypasta, the subreddit creepypasta, or it's just creepy. That's what that is. It is a place for everything scary. Find a scary picture on the internet, share it in creepy. You have this creepy little quick story to tell, share it in creepy.
Okay.
So originally NoSleep was kind of just a creepy knockoff in a way. And then slowly but surely they kind of refined everything and started implementing rules for what was allowed. They made it so pictures weren't allowed. And then eventually it turned into this is the format for the posts. It has to be, and once they got into text only posts, that is when the NoSleep as we know it now kind of took shape.
Gotcha.
And so what happened from there was NoSleep's golden rule, which is everything is true here, even if it's not. And it's a brilliant thing that they did there, because it allowed people to tell these stories. And so if someone stumbled across NoSleep, they would read this story and then go to the comments. And because everyone has to be in the comments, if you're commenting, you have to be acting like it's true. You have to be commenting on the story as if, like, if
I wondered about that. I noticed that.
Yeah. And it's called the no, it's another thing, sorry. So yeah, that has kind of always been the backbone of NoSleep. And it just makes it, and it allows the community to participate with everything, which is of course fun for the readers. And I know I can speak for myself in this, that I know other readers, or excuse me, other writers for No Sleep too. When I would be writing a series, I'd post the first or second part, and I'd get all these comments, and people would be like, oh, I bet this is going to happen. I bet he's going to go talk to this person and they're going to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, that's so much better than what I was going to write. So yeah, wow, crazy how correct you were in your guess.
That's great.
Yeah, and it made it this kind of community project, and
That's cool.
yeah, it was really fun. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love No Sleep. It got me where I am today. It has changed for the worse, because now,
That because editors have taken over.
I mean, almost, honestly, almost. So it has become now it is a place for, not really for people who just want to tell a story. There are those people there, and they are more than welcome. And those are, in my opinion, the best things being posted on No Sleep. The stuff that are like No Sleep in its original form, its original intent. But it has become a place now where serious writers who are looking to become professional authors can go and tell their stories and hone their craft. And everyone, I'd say 99% of people who are posting in No Sleep are hoping that they're going to get that message from Netflix. They're going to get
Right.
that message from Amazon saying, we would like to option your story.
So where's the place today that was like No Sleep was 10 years ago?
That's
there?
the thing. There really isn't one.
Oh.
There are some, like, there's a couple other subreddits. Like, one is Scary Short Stories,
Mhm.
and they're doing great stuff over there. They have a lot of fun stories, a lot of really creepy stuff, good work, but it has less than 500,000 followers or subscribers. And it's kind of a crapshoot starting. I was very briefly involved with this attempt to, one of the biggest complaints about No Sleep now is the amount of restriction there is in what is allowed per the rules. And the rules page is its own page. I mean, if this is where the No Sleep rules used to fit, this is where they fit now. And there's such a narrow avenue for what is allowed, where the original creepypastas, the original No Sleep stories, what made them so good was that lack of structure almost. Like, it was a place for you to just tell your story how you wanted to tell it. And now it's kind of turned the other way, where even though there's editors, you almost have more freedom being able to tell your story without the confinement of No Sleep's like rigid rules. And there's overzealous moderators who will take down a story for anything. And it's like, so many things go into having a No Sleep story be successful. It depends when you write it. It depends, when you post it, like what time of day you post it, what day of the week you post it. It depends what the title is. Like, the title of a book is everything. So title of the No Sleep story is everything. And once you post your story, if you don't get 100 upvotes in the first hour or so, it's dead in the water. And like, what moderators they will do is they'll take a story down and then say, because of one thing that's wrong with it, and you will message them, they'll take 9 hours for you to get back or for them to get back to you, and then they won't allow you to repost it. They will repost it on their end with the correction, but then no one will ever see it again.
All right, so a couple of points. The first point that strikes me as an outsider to this, wanting to learn more, is that obviously if it's on the internet, it's there forever. You can read a story that was posted in 2010, for example. You know, you can search back and read all of those back before all these rules you know, came into to place at NoSleep. The other point is that there may not be one place like NoSleep, but you know, I know that versions of this are still happening on the web. It's just not happening, you know, to this degree of this large of an audience. Let's say like 2-sentence horror stories is an example. You know, nobody wrote 2-sentence horror stories in the beginning because they wanted to get paid. They just thought,
right,
all right, let's see
That's
what I
very
can come
true.
up with here. You know,
Well, let me ask you, Nick, is given all of this, given these challenges, what do you see as the future of storytelling, not so much writing, but storytelling with technology? Is there a way forward, or do you see right now we're kind of at an impasse where you have to deal with this until something new comes along to allow people to tell the stories they want to tell?
I think that people, so even with all the restrictions of NoSleep, people who are fine with working within those parameters, they do amazing stuff. And they, like, I'm not trying to disparage anybody who still writes there. Like, I wish them all the best, truly. Like, and they're doing great. They're writing great stories. But I think what I think is going to happen is there's going to be more of an emphasis on not experimental, but like doing more audio stuff and doing more telling stories via podcasts. And
Yep.
I see a lot more storytelling podcasts popping up over the next few years.
That's what I wanted. Actually, I was hoping you'd bring up, is because what I'm saying is a lot of great horror podcasts coming up, whether it's audio storytelling, right?
Yes.
And even some, you know, for us here, which is of interest to us here, you know, cosmic horror podcasts like Old Gods of Appalachia.
Oh, I love Old Gods of Appalachia.
Yes, it's phenomenal, right? That's Mike. Yeah, we need to get that guy on here, Mike Davis.
yeah, that sounds good.
But go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that no matter what, it's the internet, and you can forge your own way forward without NoSleep. If you're, I know I'm an idealist, but if you just want to tell a good story, anybody can do that. They can do it on podcast, you know, they can do it in their own corner of Reddit or their own website, or hell, they can tell it in a thread on Twitter. There's all kinds of ways to do it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that really interests me, is when it's first and foremost people who want to tell a story. And I'm not disparaging anyone who gets paid for writing, you know, at all, because, you know, that's great. If you can get paid for doing what you love, you should. And, you know, guys like, for example, Scott Thomas, Sea of Ash, Over the Darkening Fields, you know, frankly, this is a guy that deserves to be known by millions of people. But, you know, Scott, he's a friend of mine. He's one of those guys. He you know, he never wrote because he thought he was going to get rich. He wrote because that's what he does, you know. So
like you said, if someone wants to tell a story, they're going to find a way to tell it. And I love people who take a more experimental's the word that keeps coming to mind, but I don't think that's the most appropriate word. But like people who will use something like a Twitter thread to tell a story, or a series of Instagram pictures and then an accompanying caption. Like, I think we're going to see a lot more of that in addition to the audio aspect. Like the kind of, like, I think like TikTok, I think will be big in horror storytelling over the next few years. Kind of I'll just bow to it, experimenting with different methods of storytelling. And because
and I love that. Yeah,
me too. And I think because as it is, NoSleep has kind of found what it's going to be, and I do not see it changing anytime soon.
What's your handle at NoSleep so we can go back and read yours?
Oh, Nick Boddick. It's everything of mine is Nick Boddick.
Okay, NICK
BOTIC. Yeah.
All right, and I'd like to finish up talking about this with Candle Cove, because you talked to the creator of Candle Cove.
Chris, yeah.
Yeah.
His was
great TV series.
Oh, I love Channel Zero. I talked to the guy, Brandon Scott. He was the star of seasons 3 and 4, and I talked to him, and then separately I talked to Nick Antosca about it, and that was such a cool. Anyway, sorry. I still get so like starstruck with all these people I've gotten to talk to. It's amazing. Yeah. But yeah, Candle Cove was another one of those earlier. It actually came out later than I thought it did. It came out about 2009. Whereas like Jeff the Killer and stuff, that was all 06, 07 ish. But Candle Cove is actually one of the last ones that I would say that was kind of came to life outside of anywhere like Reddit or 4chan. To be honest, I don't even remember where it came up. It was some random website. It was a forum actually. And Chris Straub, who is just amazing. Ikior, I think is his online name. I don't know. I'll have to get it later. He does amazing work, by the way. He has a whole body of work that he does. He created this like whole fictional news station. It's awesome. But Candle Cove is such a short story. It takes probably less than 2 minutes to read, and it is one of the most engaging, thought-provoking pieces of creepypasta fiction I think ever. It is a few people talking about this show that they remember watching as kids, and then the last line is, I just asked my mom about it, and she said for a half hour every week, or for a half hour every day after school, I would sit and watch static on a TV. And like,
that's fucking creepy, isn't it?
Seriously, that's brilliant. Like, and that one is it's another one of the most discussed pieces of internet horror fiction, because from there, that one was kind of the first one that started getting fans involved. Like, people would make Jeff the Killer art here and there. They would make like any of those other earlier ones. Smile Dog was one. Slender Man, obviously. I mean, Slender Man's probably the most well-known creepypasta of all time. But Candle Cove, people created episodes of the fictional show Candle Cove and put them on YouTube. People created like the characters that were mentioned in the original story. Jawbone, like this creepy skeleton thing whose mouth moved from side to side. Like, people would make marionettes of him and like actually create this fictional like, it was the first one that got that kind of real
group storytelling,
that adoration from just so many people. And yeah, that's a really cool example of everything.
That's really that's really awesome. All of this kind of makes me think of faux documentaries, which, guys, we've talked about this on the show before, which I differentiate between faux documentaries and found footage. Like, for example,
like Savage Land.
Savage Land is an excellent example.
Love Savage Land.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
so actually, I'm gonna make where my sons and I are watching that tonight. They've never seen it.
Yeah, I'll always be grateful to you for
nice.
bringing up Savage Land to me, Rich. The other one that's I think the prime example that I've talked about a million times, and Paul and Nadia and I did a Patreon podcast on it, is Lake Mungo.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you can watch Lake Mungo knowing that it's not real, but if you sit there and watch it in the dark and you put yourself in the mindset and pretend that you're watching a documentary, then it's really, really creepy. And that's terrifying. And it makes me, all of this creepypasta, no sleep, it all reminds me of that kind of storytelling, faux
Yes.
documentary
Yes.
storytelling.
It's found footage in the literary realm, right?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
I don't think it
And
is found footage. It's more of the faux documentary.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, okay. So
In my
perhaps it's
opinion,
a
let's put
better-
it that way.
No. I think you're right, Mike. I'm just thinking, when I describe this, it's okay. Found footage, faux documentary. It in the literary realm, it lends this kind of realism.
Yeah.
Right to the writing, to the story that you don't get if you, as opposed to buying a Stephen King novel, right? Or an anthology in a Barnes and Noble store, right? This lends itself to this kind of realism that people might be like, ooh, this gives me the creeps in a way that I don't get if I buy, say, a book.
Well, here's the thing, Rich, you're right. Here's the thing about, let's say, watching the scariest horror movie you've ever seen.
Mhm.
It may scare the hell out of you, but it's not real. It's
Right,
makeup,
exactly.
it's CGI,
Yep.
these are actors and
Mhm.
everything. But with, say, a No Sleep, especially when it started out, as I understand it, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're reading this and think you can't really have that thought, this is fake,
Yeah.
because it could be real. The one I read earlier today about the person that was living in their house for weeks and months spying on them, I can't say to myself, well, that's scary as hell, but it's not real. It might be, and it
Mhm.
has happened actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, go ahead,
So
Bridget.
you said that the No Sleep podcast is totally different, but I find that it's interesting because a few episodes back, and I apologize for not knowing this right offhand, the author and the story, but
God, you should, damn it.
I know, right? I was looking
Sorry,
and I was
Bridget.
trying to find it, but they
I believe
actually
you.
they played on this, which is brilliant because the story was somebody who wrote a story online. And it was just, they published a story that they'd written as a kid about this dream about a witch or whatever. And they posted it online. And then it started taking a life of its own. And she believes in the story that actually brought the witch to reality because enough people were reading the story and believing it.
That's awesome.
That's interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
really
And
cool.
there are supposedly more episodes of it that I haven't gotten to listen to yet, but I think that's cool that they totally played on that whole concept of, oh, she just posted this story that she wrote as a kid, but then now it's like, it's become its own horror.
Matt?
Yeah.
There was a very interesting graphic novel series a few years ago called The Unwritten, which if you haven't read it, it's really it's brilliant. I mean, you got to
Love
be
the
able to,
unwritten.
yeah, it's about the power of stories, and characters from the primal stories of humankind are traveling through it and manipulating reality based on their ability to control the power of a story. So like there's this one evil character from the epic Gilgamesh who is trying to destroy all the stories in the world so he can finally be at peace or something like that. It's a very similar kind of concept, but not in a creepypasta sense.
Dan Simmons, yeah.
Oh, I found it. It's This Book Will Kill You, Part 1 is the one I listened to by
is that by David Wong?
No, it's Alexander Gordon Smith.
Okay.
Yeah, This Book Will Kill You, Part 1.
This
It's
book
in
will kill you. Okay.
it's in season 18, episode 11.
And this is a podcast,
Of
Bridget?
what? Sorry.
It's the No Sleep podcast.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
I should mention
Yeah.
there's a lot of overlap. So the No Sleep podcast is a different entity. It has no connection to the subreddit, but a lot of people who write for No Sleep, the subreddit, will submit their stories to No Sleep, the podcast. So there is a
Gotcha.
lot of there's a lot of overlap there, but yeah.
And
That makes sense.
To Bridget's point and Matt's point about a story, enough people believing it that it becomes reality. It's a fun thing to think about. Dan Simmons wrote a book called The Fifth Heart. And Let me just read you the synopsis and you'll see what I mean, why I'm mentioning this book. In 1893, Sherlock Holmes and Henry James come to America together to solve the mystery of the 1885 death of Clover Adams, wife of the esteemed historian Henry Adams, memory of the Adams family that has given the United States 2 presidents. Clover's suicide appears to be more than it at first seemed. The suspected foul play may involve matters of national importance. Holmes is currently on his great hiatus, his 3-year absence after Reichenbach falls, during which time the people of London believe him to be deceased. Holmes has faked his own death because, through his powers of rationalization, the great detective has come to the conclusion that he is a fictional character.
Yes. Yeah.
And I saw
Awesome.
that, and
Yeah.
I was like, I have to fucking read this book.
Yeah.
This is amazing. And it's I toward the end, Holmes finds the answer, and I can't really reveal it, but it's a brilliant phrase. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, pick up The Fifth Heart. And if you like Sherlock Holmes, which I do, there's a bonus. That's just a bonus too.
You said it's by Dan Simmons, like the Terror Dan Simmons?
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
Oh,
Same guy. The Fifth Heart.
Yep.
By Dan
It's
Simmons.
a wonderful book, and yeah, that's what makes the book so great. Is Sherlock Holmes determines he's a fictional character.
Yeah, he realizes that he probably is a
realizes.
fictional character.
Based
Yeah.
upon his deductive skills. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yep.
So anything that we didn't ask you that we should bring up before we finish, Nick?
I actually do have a question, Mike, if I
Sure.
may ask of Nick. Nick, so tell me about what got you into scary stories in the first place. Tell me, about your, going back.
Yeah, Nick has some books out there. So
What got you into this, and what got you into writing and then talking about this kind of stuff?
So
good question.
I guess I would consider myself a horror fan from, I read Goosebumps as a kid. I wasn't like a diehard.
How
horror.
old are you? I'm sorry. So when were you born?
89. I'm 33.
Okay, so you're 33. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I was reading Goosebumps when they were at like the peak. R.L. Stine was like the master of, so and then I got interested in writing itself when I was about 12 years old. I read the screenplay to Kevin Smith's movie Clerks. I was a weird kid.
Oh
I
my
was
goodness.
a weird teenager, 12-year-old.
I love that movie, by the way.
Me too.
Great movie.
I got to meet him a few weeks ago, and I got to thank him.
And he's a comic book nerd. I mean, he owns a
yeah.
comic shop, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
He's a Batman nerd. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah.
He's amazing. Yeah. It was so cool. He's like my hero in life, and I got to thank him and talk to him. It was amazing. Anyways, so I had some issues as a adult, and basically ended up in rehab. And when I got out, they were like, you should try to find a hobby, something to keep you busy. And in the midst of looking for something like that, I stumbled across NoSleep. And I was watching scary movies at the time, just kind of floating around through life, not really doing much of anything. And I was like, I want to get back into reading. Maybe reading will be my hobby. And so I started looking online for books, and then eventually made my way to NoSleep. Started, taking all that in. Amazing stuff. Pen Pal was one of the first ones I read. And that just seized me in such a visceral way. I loved it. And I started reading a bunch of other ones, and not in like an arrogant way, but I was like, I think I could do this. I think I could write something as scary or scarier than this. Not necessarily Pen Pal, since that's king of the hill, but and so I wrote a short story. I still remember it. It was terrible. It was about a mannequin that comes to life, and it was not scary. It got no play on NoSleep at all. I think I actually deleted it, but then after that, I read for another few weeks, and then I wrote another story, and that one blew up. it got thousands of upvotes, thousands of comments. And once I got that kind of that initial hit, I was like, I need more of this. And that was pretty much all she wrote. I've been writing ever since, and to varying success on NoSleep. I found a lot of success on NoSleep writing there. I got a pretty dedicated fan base from it, and I released a collection in 2017, I want to say, after doing a Kickstarter, which got fully funded. And that collection is unbelievably poorly put together, astonishingly bad. The stories are good, but there is no editing. It is in there with like a story. One story will end on the left-hand page and the next one will start 2 lines below it on that same left-hand page. Like there's spelling errors. It is just, it would never be allowed in a bookstore. Like if I send it to an editor, they'd be like, never send us anything again. And but no, it was cool seeing a book with my name on it. And
so could I say then that could I say that like storytelling then saved you or grounded you?
Very much so.
Okay.
I would say, yeah, it definitely.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, because I mean, without getting into the whole thing, I think if I wouldn't have quit doing what I was doing when I did, I've always said I'm pretty sure I had about a month left and I would have been dead. And so that month in there, I've always looked at as one of the most important months, if not the most important month of my life. And because I found the thing that I have been able to really build a life from that point now for the last 7 years. And, like I said before, I've been selling stories to magazines and anthologies and, podcasts that get millions of listeners, and really kind of to start make a career out of this, which is my ultimate goal. I do want to do that.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. You're a trophy of grace of storytelling. So
I try.
First of all, kudos to you for making the change, and for the success that you've had so far. I've always said, and I think this is an important point, that if you're trying to give up something destructive, in many cases, a habit or an addiction or whatever it may be, you can't just give it up. You have to replace it with something else. That's going to be your best chance of success. So, if you want to, whatever, you want to quit smoking, you better replace it with something else other than smoking. And that's exactly what you did. Whatever destructive thing you were into, and it's not my business, but you replaced it with this.
I did. Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah. Because it's no big secret. I'm an open book about everything. I was very much into heroin back in the day, and the pursuit of it, the use of it, it was my entire life. It was everything. So like you just said, if I wouldn't have replaced it with anything, I would have been doing nothing, because that was everything. Take that away, there's nothing. So needed something. And so I definitely agree there. Yeah.
And thank goodness, because now we get to, be the beneficiaries of all your knowledge of all these other types of storytelling that some of us maybe, I was not. I was aware of Mr. Ballin, only because my sons listened to that guy.
Yeah.
Right. I'm aware of some of the other stuff, Jeff the Killer, but only because if my sons hadn't brought it up to me, because I'm not a YouTube guy, I would have been exclusively stuck in the book world. Yeah. I know what's been published and I know what I've read, but I would never have been really aware of this other kind of storytelling. And thank goodness, you're here to, push that knowledge of these other types of storytelling, because I think it's a wonderful thing, because now I'll be on YouTube tonight and with my kids, and I'm sure I'll be obsessed, and they'll be like, Dad.
Well,
I love this stuff.
This is, you know, Walt Whitman said, "The powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse." When you're on heroin, you may be pursuing pleasure, but you're not contributing a verse to the world, to the universe,
Yeah.
and you are now. And it's not about, shouldn't be anyway, contributing the biggest verse, or being the most famous, or the richest, or the next Stephen King. It's about contributing your verse, you know, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So, you know, Trevor Henderson, he's a friend of mine, and you could look at it as his way of storytelling was his art. You know, he created Siren Head and all of
Mhm.
that, and now it's huge, it's everywhere.
Mhm.
But the found footage, he was telling a story, found footage art, he was telling a story right there with a work of art.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways to tell a story.
Yeah.
So,
His stuff is amazing. I'm a huge fan of his.
yeah, he's great, and he's a really nice guy too.
Yeah.
So anyway, Nick, thanks so much for being on here today, man.
No,
So-
thank you guys. Believe me, the privilege is all mine. I appreciate it so much. I've been a fan of the show. I found it probably 6 months ago or so, and
Yeah.
just blew through every episode I could. And I'm still
Bravo.
catching up on all the old ones. I'm like, yeah. So I
Just
love
remember, we don't remember anything we say, and we never watch our old episodes on purpose.
I will say this, as you
By
go,
design.
as you go way back in time, we were just talking. I didn't know I was going to turn this into a podcast, you know, quote unquote. And so if you go way back, the sound gets worse, you know, the sound quality problems
I
get
have
worse and worse, you know.
noticed.
You go back to 2014 and I'm like, I should fucking take those down, you know. It's just
No way,
horrible.
man. No way. It's the foundation upon which this all was built.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I have considered taking them down. Now, last question for you. Don't you wish DeBronzo would shut the fuck up? You know, this
I
whole
feel like he hasn't
podcast.
said a word, literally
I
know.
not a word
Mike,
the whole
what the
time.
heck? Especially in
I'm
Jersey.
just taking all this in. I don't know anything about this stuff. So I'm good. I'm speaking. Say it's possible.
I'm a big surprise. If you watch this show, you know I've got a chronic illness and I'm having a really bad day with it. So I'm not going to continue too much longer, but I do want to talk about a couple of things real quick. And you're welcome to stay if you want there. While we,
Yeah, if you don't mind.
yeah, no, I
Yay.
don't mind at all. First thing I noticed is that there's some really, there's some good TV shows out there that at least I'm interested in. I haven't watched them yet, but there's a new Quantum Leap. I don't know how good it is, but I
It's
love time
fun.
travel.
I've
Is
I've
it?
been watching it. I've watched the first 4 episodes. It's nothing heavy, you know. It's a really fun cast, fun scripts. They play off each
Great.
other really well. Very appealing. It's really not dark.
I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that. I'll give it because I love time
was-
travel. So
It was supposed to have Dean Stockwell in it to be Al again, but he passed away. It was always the plan. I just read something about it.
really,
It's not a full reboot. It's still connected to Sam and the original Quantum
Yeah,
Leap.
it's like
Oh,
a
no kidding.
sequel almost. It's like
Yeah.
20 years in the
kidding.
future.
and then speaking of time travel, the time traveler's wife is of course a novel, and I really enjoyed the movie that came out years back, and now it's a new TV series. I haven't started that either, but the time traveler's wife, I don't remember what it's on, but you can look it up obviously. And then okay, vampires. Let Me In is a new series, and also Interview with a Vampire is a new series. So, you know, a lot of sequels or reboots going on here that of stuff I personally like, and I know you guys do too. So, I'm glad to hear that about Quantum Leap, Matt. Real quickly, you guys watched a movie you were telling me before we started recording called
So-
Saloon.
So, right. So we try and cast a wide net. We tend to cosmic horror, but we're loose about it on the Lovecraft Easing movie night.
Mhm.
So we, of course, have seen a lot of movies from North America, a few from South America, a lot from Europe, quite a few from Asia and Australia. We'd never seen a movie from Africa. And I think it was Rich told me about it. It's a movie called Saloum. It is set in
How do you spell that?
Senegal, Saloum. It's
Right.
set in Senegal. It's shot in French. There are English subtitles.
Okay.
It is really entertaining on a great number of levels. First of all, it's not. There's tense moments, but it's not gory. You think it's going to be gory. It's not really gory at all. The creature design ends up being startlingly original. I think I've never quite seen anything like it. The way that the plot unfolds, you think that you understand what these people are doing, and that you get to the end, you realize you didn't know what they were really all about at all. And it explores settings and scenes that we don't see because it's set in like everyday parts of Africa, not like just, oh, we're going to have this like great white hunter going through the jungle. It's like, I really thought it was very well done. It's not that long. It's only like 85 minutes.
Yeah, it's a
I don't think
wonderful,
it
wonderful
shouldn't have
movie.
been any longer.
Mhm.
I'll check
I
it out.
wouldn't call it cosmic
And the
horror, but it's
character
like
development
African
is
spiritualism.
I loved the character development.
Yeah.
I cared about, all of the it's just done really well. And like Matt said, I was not privy to West African horror, right? So this movie was done really, I really enjoyed this. It's something new, and the story I really enjoyed, but it was different. And like Matt said, it was the backdrop and the reasons for why characters do what they do. If you don't understand what's going on in West Africa, maybe you're not going to get it. But I think that the way that the movie develops the characters, you get a glimpse, so that if you're not familiar with that, you will get it.
And the other thing is, geographically, okay, I'm an impoverished American, but if you
Boy,
look at
yeah,
the
right.
map of Africa, just a glance at the map of Africa to see where the countries stack up, it all makes the things make more sense, some of their decisions.
Mhm.
On this podcast, as every listener / viewer knows, is that one of the big things we're always trying to do is recommend new books, stories, experiences like what we talked about today, storytelling experiences in movies, TV shows. So yeah, check this out. Saloum, SOLOUM.
SALOUM.
Okay, thank you. All right, so in that vein, Mike Flanagan has got a new TV series out on Netflix called where else, but Netflix, called The Midnight Society.
Well done.
Midnight Club.
Well done.
Midnight
I
Club.
really
Thank you.
enjoyed
I'm
it.
sorry. The
Loved it.
Midnight Club.
Club.
And at first I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, okay, it's Flanagan. I love his stuff, with very few exceptions. And but it's a bunch of kids, and I'm 51, and like,
thank you, Mike, because I thought the same thing, brother.
I don't know if I want to
was like,
watch
I don't
it.
need to
Mike,
see.
But
Hey, Mike,
yeah,
poor fucking baby.
yeah, yeah. But I got old 15 years ago, unlike you.
Oh,
But
So
I was
anyway.
thinking that I don't need to see a bunch of 90210, like, I was like, okay.
Well,
yet
first of all,
another-
they're all terminal, so there's a gravitas there that
but it
they.
is so well done, I have to say.
I'm on the 5th episode. It's actually really sucking me in. I really
is,
love
yes.
it. And I
Well done.
especially love the idea of this, this chowder society idea of, these kids that meet at midnight and
Yes.
tell these stories. And the stories within the stories, they're all really good too.
They are, I think they're part of So when they optioned Christopher Pike's books, I think the stories within the stories are some of those books.
Really, that's
Yes. And I will say the very first episode broke the Guinness Book of World Records for jump
scares. Yeah.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
that alone made me want to watch the first episode. When I watched it, I just laughed because I thought, oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah. And it's like a commentary on jumps. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, they talk about it. It's real meta.
They
in
do.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they talk about why jump scares work and where they don't, and like
Yes.
if they're good or
Great.
bad, or yeah, it's
It's
really
So
done so
I
well.
don't know where it's going because I'm on episode 5 out of 10, I believe, but I'm really enjoying the experience so far. So if you're ancient like myself and thinking you don't want to watch a series about a bunch of kids, you should watch it.
And it's got what's her name from Heather Langenkamp.
Yeah, which
from-
character is she in
Oh,
the?
yeah.
She's the Nightmare on Elm. She's the main
Mm.
character.
She is
Yeah,
the
Nancy.
yeah
Nightmare on Elm Street and the
The-
original
the OG.
the OG. She is one of the OG Scream Queens.
she's
No, I
one of
mean,
the
who's she
OG final
playing?
girls.
Who's she
She's
playing?
she's the doctor.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so yeah. I'm really enjoying that. Like I said, feeling poorly this weekend, so it's kind of hard to read sometimes. So I'm kind of laying on the couch and I'm like, that Fright Night remake in 2011, it wasn't the classic, but it wasn't bad either. You know,
It wasn't bad, but I love it because it had Scott Anton. Was it Yeltsin?
Anton Yelkin, yeah, he's a great
Yelkin,
actor.
and I really enjoyed him in the Star Trek movies.
But I'm watching it and I'm thinking, man, this version of Jerry, he is quite the sexist vampire, man. He's talking about how women need to be managed and everything, and I'm like, you're not just evil, you're a dick. You know,
which you didn't get from what's his name in the 1980s version,
right?
Because they don't
Brandon.
always go together, being
That's right.
evil and a dick.
Right.
Glad you clarified.
You're not just evil, you're an asshole, man. You're a sexist asshole. So I just
Chris?
thought that was kind of funny. Okay, so I talked about Midnight Club. Oh, here's something really cool, guys. And I've got TBR again in the show notes here, which sometimes it's stuff we've talked about on the episode. Sometimes it isn't, but in any case, the main fake complaint I get about this show is that I make people's TBR ever larger and ever larger, or we do, I should say. So I've got 4 books on the. You're very welcome. I've got 4 books on there, and we've talked about The Fifth Heart, talked about Pen Pal. And another one just came out is by Matt Carden, Journals, Volume 1, 1993 through 2001. Now, if you read weird fiction, you know the name Matt Carden. He's written several books, To Rouse Leviathan, fiction and nonfiction, and he just closed The Teeming Brain, which is all the articles are still out there to be read, and he started a Substack. But he apparently he's always kept sort of this inner journal since 1993, and so he just published the first volume, 1993 through 2001. And Matt's a very deep, intelligent guy. And, even in 1993, I think he's about my age, so he would have been about 22, 23. Even at that age, reading his journal, it's really interesting. And a bonus, it's on Kindle Unlimited as well. If you're a Kindle person. Otherwise, you can get it in print, paperback or hardcover, actually, from, I think, Hippocampus. So anyway, there's that. I added Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter because right before the show, you guys said it was the best werewolf.
I think the
novel
Brian
ever.
Easton's Autobiography of Werewolf Hunter is the best werewolf novel ever written.
Okay.
Really?
It is. Think of it as Apocalypse Now meets werewolves. In the to the point to where the protagonist, who was a Native American of Cheyenne dog soldier descent, is as bad as the werewolves he kills because he hates them so much. This is the kind of guy, the torture scenes where he would kill humans who support werewolves. You think, holy cow. It's like this guy is as bad, right? Almost because his hatred is just consumes him. And I will tell you, it's a 3. There's an omnibus edition that goes through Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter, Heart of Scars, and The Lineage. And they put those 3 novels together in the omnibus edition. I want to say Brian P. Easton is from Illinois. But this is a really dark, violent novel. But so well done in terms of the writing. You just think, wow. It is like watching it's like watching Apocalypse Now. It leaves you scarred.
I'll
And,
check it
pick that
out.
up.
I am into it.
It is and I would say it's even better than one of, I love Stephen Graham Jones and I loved Mongrels. Love it. One of my favorite. And I love Toby. There was a novel he wrote in poetic form. Is it Toby? Gosh, I forget it. It's called Sharp Teeth. But this novel is better than those guys.
Okay.
This novel is so well written. It's violent and it's got a Wendigo. I mean, it's about Native American, redosant, like Cheyenne dog soldier, martial arts, along, trying to be the guy who has to fight the beast, which is a werewolf. And the werewolves in this are not like you would see in others. And in other words, that the werewolves in this novel, their wolf form is their true form, and that the humans, when they die, they don't become human again because the human form was never their true form. Right.
That's interesting.
Oh, okay.
That
This
is
is very,
More of a skinwalker.
very,
type.
very, very violent. This guy he's attacking cannibal kitchens. He's attacking, everything. He's like this kind of anti-hero and he does all these good things, but
Okay.
he's also absolutely every bit as violent as the creature he hunts and is cruel.
Stop digging. You struck oil, man. I am going to read this tonight.
Yeah. Read
Yeah.
Brian
This
P.
sounds
Easton's
awesome.
Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter. Ben Handelman and I have talked back and forth about this, and he and I have both read all these, and he's in agreement that this is the best werewolf novel ever written. You're
Well,
not going to get any better than this.
I've got the link to that in the show notes too. Apparently Halloween Ends sucks.
I heard it
Quite
was awful.
badly.
Awful.
I've heard varying reviews. I haven't watched it yet.
I haven't
Well,
either.
it's
I
got,
am
last time I looked, it's got a 40% Rotten Tomato score with whatever stock you put into that.
There was someone that wrote an article, one of the papers, I can't remember who it was now, but they're like, Halloween Ends, spoilers. It probably doesn't.
That's funny.
That's right.
I'm
right,
one
so-
of the most forgiving people when it comes to movies. I can find something to like in everything I watch, and it was difficult for me to do that with Halloween Ends.
Ah, dang.
I'm the
not-
least
I'm
critical
not gonna
person
try.
of movies.
I'm
I'm
not gonna
so
try that.
not critical at all, but I kind of see what they were going for, but it was a mess.
I
Sad.
finished
How
Rings-
about the rings? Yeah.
I finished The Rings of Power,
Yes.
and I will just say I don't really want to talk about this because I gotta get going, but I will just say that the surprises in the final episode were really awesome,
Yes.
but the storytelling was so messy getting there, and even the final episode was so dragged out. I mean, one, I won't say who, but one character saying goodbye to everybody, and it's like, can they drag this goodbye out any longer? And it's like 10 minutes
Yeah.
of goodbyes. It's like, just fucking go already.
The
Start
whole first
walking.
season was too slow paced.
Start
Yeah.
It
fucking
was
walking,
just
man.
too slow.
Yeah.
But now that they've got after the finale, I think next season, if they get is the time you can see the second age really begin to come to the fore. So they've got
100%.
all
Sure
this.
hope.
This whole first season was painful to get through
Mm.
because it was so slow.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is it has the potential of being Star Trek Next Gen good when it gets its beard second season.
Yes, yes.
Well,
I
in
think
that
next
light,
season's going to be really good.
it better be. As I'm not getting past the first episode of season 2 if it's like this. I'll be just like,
it's
I'm
really
done.
hard.
Like
You
first
guys
season.
are Star Wars in this bullshit. I'm out of here. You know?
We've never.
Well, you said Star Wars. First of all, we're talking about Star
It's
Trek.
Star
How
Trek.
dare you?
No,
like-
I'm saying
like-
there's
Well,
Star
Mike
Wars
doesn't
in
like
it.
Star Wars anyway.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying there's Star Wars in it. I mean, I forget which Star Wars movie me and Logan went to a few years back. We actually walked out of the theater. It was so
Mm.
damn bad.
Oh man.
I mean, we're sitting there, we've paid for it, and Logan's like, he was like 16 at the time, 15 or 16. He's like, Dad, do you like this movie? I'm like, not really. He's like, can we leave? And I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Oh my
Dang.
god.
Wow.
Whoa.
We have never done that. And believe me,
Whoa.
I don't have money to go to a theater most of the time. So
Yeah, I was
if
gonna
I'm-
say,
That's
What?
pretty bad.
that's, and
yeah,
it was,
because
I
the
don't, I wish I
popcorn
could
and the
remember
Coke
which.
cost
So, Mike, I'll
forever.
just tell you this.
Solo? Was it Solo? I'm trying to think of when that was.
No,
2016?
no, I think it was the one before that.
Last Jedi.
Yeah, I think that might have been it.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
I'm an apologist. I liked Last Jedi.
Well, see,
I don't know.
there's only one movie that I almost walked out on. It was My Dinner with Andre, and I was ready to leave, but my dad was with me, and he had fallen asleep.
You couldn't wake him up to get him to
And he
leave.
woke up like 5 minutes before the end, and he said, "Hey, this was pretty good."
My Dinner with Andre.
Classic.
All right. So last but not least, as most of you know, if you're $5 Patreon, you get access to all the Patreon podcasts. And there's some really, honestly, some really great stuff there. If you're, the next tier is $10 and you get to hang out with us once or twice a month, non-recorded, just hang out with the panelists and chat, whatever, you know, it's a lot of fun. But I've been thinking about adding something to that. Pete and I have been talking about this, and this particular podcast episode is an excellent segue into this. And because it's about storytelling, and Pete and I have come up with something called the Carcosan Club. And if you think of it in terms of the Midnight Club or the Chowder Society, that's all I will say for now, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're a $5 Patreon and, you know, that's all you can do or all you want to do, believe me, I appreciate your support. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. But I wanted to make the $10 level even more, to add even more to it. And I mean, I always give the $10 and up people some extras, like, you know, Tom Ligotti recordings done by John Padgett, things like that I've done. But I wanted to add even more to it. So, and speaking of just the five, so anyway, stay tuned, more to come on that. This coming week, I'm going to be talking with Keelan Patrick Burke and Kevin Lucia about Charles Grant.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I was rereading Keelan's introduction to, I think it's The Orchard, book 2 of Grant's Ox Run station series, and he wrote the introduction October 24th, some years back. Excuse me. And one of the things he said in the introduction, was, "This is Charlie's season." And I was like, you know what? It is Charlie's season. Me and Keelan and Kevin Lucia, who's a big fan of Charles Grant too, and writes a lot of quiet horror. We should do a Patreon podcast episode. So we're gonna do that. You read Kevin Lucia's book last October, Bridget. October
Mhm.
Nights, right?
So
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So so a couple things to look forward to in the Patreon. Just wanted to let you guys know that. Matt, prize.
Yes. Remember, you can win a copy of the novel Crooked. You could be entered into our drawing if you send an email to easyandprizes@gmail.com and just put Crooked in the subject heading. We're probably going to be drawing a winner at this rate pretty close to Thanksgiving, so you got a lot of time to get your entry in.
Right. So easyandprizes@gmail.com. Nick, thanks so much for being here, man. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having me.
Yeah.
This was so
Thanks,
much
Nick.
fun.
Great
This was
conversation, brother.
Truly an honor.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Anytime. Hint, hint.
I'll have you back on. We got to talk about your book sometime too. Bridget, Matt, Rich, DeBronzo. DeBronzo, thanks for all your input today.
Least I can do. The absolute least.
I can't. I can't.
So Mike, I usually say it's the least I can do, so it's what I did.
Actually, DeBronzo most of the time has a lot of great input, which is why I have to give him so much shit for being quiet today.
It's an off day, but I just honestly like.
No, you were soaking it in, man. That's what you were doing.
Yeah, no.
And I still need to
honestly,
get with you, Mike, about talk about the RPG, about Call of Cthulhu RPG. So we need to discuss that.
What RPG? What are you guys doing that I don't know about?
Well, I'm learning a
Nothing.
lot from DeBronzo, and
I don't know what he's talking
what I
about.
learned last night was that my sons are playing RPGs, and so I think that's an in for me to get in there and make them play Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu RPG.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
Definitely should. Yeah. So anyway, thanks everybody, guys. Thanks for being here. Matt, thanks for providing the prizes. And all my Patreons, thanks for keeping me going financially. And we will see everybody next week.
Bye.